All right, so today on Rosh Chodesh, because it is the same day that the President of the U.S. is giving his State of the Union address, I thought it would be interesting to do something that we haven't done in over 5 years, which is it's in tongue-in-cheek in some ways, but very serious in other ways, to take a look at the state of the body, but not just the whole body, but the body through the eyes of our little group. You know, through what we're doing through MTY and through Beth Shalom, and just seeing, because we are, I promise you, a microcosm of the rest of the body. There's nothing happening here that's unique that's not happening in other places. The struggles we have, they have. The successes we have, they have, okay? So I'm not aware of what's happening everywhere, but I am aware of what's happening in the places that we do get to have some interaction with, etc. And so hopefully this could be useful, because I think that there's really great benefit to taking a moment. All businesses do it, all successful people do it, where they take a moment to think about how far they've come, are they where they expected to be by now or not, where are they now, and where would they like to be, and to plan and look at that from an assessment point of view, then they can plan forward more accurately. You can make adjustments. Because look, we are supposed to be transforming and conforming into Yeshua's image, all right? Amen? That's what we're supposed to be doing, aren't we? Well, I believe, maybe you don't agree, but I think the only way to know for sure if you're getting any closer is to stop, pause, and examine yourself. And examine what you're doing and how you're doing it and how the group is doing as a whole. Because we're not just doing this is an individual endeavor done in a group dynamic. Okay? You're not just doing this by yourself. I know there's a lot of people out there talking about how we should just be sitting at home and just on our knees and Yeshua teaching us privately one-on-one. I don't know how you're going to get those private lessons, but good for you. But the point is, this was meant to be done in a group dynamic. Because you're supposed to be going into a place called the body. We're supposed to be in the process of becoming this thing called the body of Yeshua. This thing called the bride, this thing called, those who are of Israel. Israel's a corporate thing, it's not an individual. Not since Jacob was the only one called Israel. Okay, went from him into the 12, it became a group dynamic, a group thing. And so that's why we're given the two great commands. How to do the individual thing, which is how we love him and treat him, our creator, and how do we love each other, the group dynamic. And he instructs us on how to do both. And so I just think it's a good idea, and it behooves us to examine these things on a regular enough basis. And because this is the 7-year anniversary for our congregation, by the way, we first met on January 14th on Shabbat in 2012. Okay, so it's just a little over a month after that anniversary date would have been. Okay? On January 14th, 2012, on that Shabbat is when we first started as Beth Shalom in Chattanooga. Now, we did have a ministry years before that, but this is, we'll just start from here, from when we started 7 years ago. And, since we started, we have moved around quite a little bit. We had one home for a good number of years, and then Father started moving us around a little bit. And during that time, we also had a lot of people come and visit. Some stayed, some left. There's always that sort of flow within the body. Of course, the hard part is that we have emotions and we care about people, and sometimes we're very sad to see them go. Sometimes we could actually be really glad to see them go, and that's even probably a harder emotion because we need to probably repent of those things. Okay? The sad part, there's no repentance for it. We become attached, and we're sad to see people leave. But sometimes we're like, praise Yah, they left. No, don't say praise Yah, they left. It would be great if nobody would have to ever leave. Because after all, that's what the kingdom's going to be, is a bunch of people that will all stay together forever. But through our time, we've had quite a few people come through the doors. Some have stayed, like I said, and some have left. And in that process, and out of all of that, I don't know if we want to call it the growing pains of 7 years, but in that developmental process, I really believe that we are becoming a family. Now, some of you are going to go back and listen to Developing the Character of Yeshua. In the first part of that, I did the same teaching, so to speak. And you know what? I might say some of the exact same things I said then, because some of it is still true exactly the same. We're still seeing people come and go, like 2 years ago. well, 5 years ago, like 2 years into it. We're seeing growth. We're also seeing, by the way, not only are we seeing growth, but we're seeing stagnation. We're seeing regression. Some people are growing. That's great. Some people are going backwards. Not so great. Some people aren't moving at all. They're just stuck. They're just there. And you're the only one that should be deciding where you are in all that. Don't anybody sit here trying to figure out who's growing and who's not and who's going backwards and who's not. Judge not, lest you be judged, right? Let's not try to figure out who the wheat and the tares are and all that kind of thing. What we do want to do, though, is examine ourselves in that individual context and in the group context. Because you may be pretty good at looking at yourself from how are you doing in your worship, submission, covenanting, love of our Creator. Maybe you're doing great at that. But how are you doing in the group dynamic? Now, it's not for me to tell you how I do with or not do with my Heavenly Father, because that's a private thing with me and Him. But I can tell you, and you all know because you've seen it, like everybody else, I struggle at times with some of those issues. We all can struggle with each other. People are hard to deal with, and you are people. Okay, we all fall into the category of people. We are all hard to deal with, you know? People are capable of really wonderful things, but we're also capable of really awful things. We could be cold, callous, vindictive, harsh, mean, uncaring, all kinds of whatever words, controlling. We can be the opposite of that. We could just ignore people and neglect them. We're capable of but on the other side of it, we're capable of so much compassion and love and joy and mercy and generosity. And so that's really the harder part in some ways. Not really that tough to stop eating pork and shellfish, etc., and move from Sunday to Saturday, whatever. But how do we grow up and are dealing with each other? So I want us to be really thinking about that. Now, I will tell you, let me start again. It doesn't matter my opinion, but I'm going to give it to you anyway, okay? In other words, whether I say this or not, it means nothing except I'm just sharing with you. I have been very proud of what I've seen in general, okay? The reason I started off that way is I said, it doesn't matter if I'm proud of you or not. That should not be your point to make me proud of you, okay? It should be about making Him proud of you. But I'm just letting you know that watching this thing for 7 years and how it's grown and how it's changed and developed and I hate to say the word evolved, but, you know, human beings don't evolve from, you know, creatures in the ocean to become human beings, but we, as a dynamic, can evolve and grow as we adapt and we learn. Okay, so congregations and the dynamic of a group can evolve, and I've watched us grow into a family. Okay? I see people really caring about each other. Of course, because we really care about each other, all the other nonsense sort of comes in as well. Because you know what? If you don't care about me and I don't care about you, I really can't hurt you. The only time, and I watch husbands and wives who really fight bad, somewhere deep down they still care or they wouldn't be that mad at each other. The harder thing is when they got to the point where they really don't care and they don't even, there's nothing there. There's just cold. But if they're still fighting and mad and angry and hurting each other, well, it's something to work with. So when you start to love each other and you start to really get close to each other, guess what? You're going to disappoint each other. You're going to frustrate each other. You're going to misinterpret something, or maybe it was done on purpose where you're going to hurt each other. And so we got our feelings all out there, and we got to get our feelings bags, you know, pick all that mess up. But meanwhile, you're starting to become a family. Because after all, doesn't that stuff kind of all happen in people's families? Some of the worst, ugliest, some of the best, wonderful things all happen in what? A family setting. So we're becoming a family. And guess what? Sometimes not everybody in the family likes each other. Sometimes not everybody in the family talks to each other. Sometimes not everybody in the family is even in the same space. They move away and avoid each other. But what a joy it is when there's restoration. That's why you got the story of the prodigal son. Because if you had a child that went away, what joy would you have if they came back? Especially if they came back humbled. Because a lot of times they come back with attitude. And they expect you to be codependent with them and to enable them to continue in whatever foolishness they're doing. Because, well, you're my parents, you need to do this. No, but what if they came back humble? I'm so sorry, I don't deserve anything. Could I even just eat the food that you're giving to the pigs, you know? That's a humbling that's gone on. And what's the thing that our Father's looking to do with us? He wants to see us get humbled. And so that's part of the dynamic here. You know, we've seen a lot of struggling and a lot of growth. We've seen a lot of both of those things in the dynamic of individuals that we just talked about. We've also seen that in family structures. Okay, I don't know any time frame where I've been involved in leadership, ministry, etc., where there's not been an attack on family structure, where there's not been an attack on marriages. And by attack, I want us to get into Satan's trying to wreck everything. Remember, and I said this, I think, last Saturday, he only takes opportunity where you will give him opportunity. Problem is, we're not working on these things hard enough, so we open doors for him to get right in there. Are you going to take that from her? You going to take that from him? Can you believe? I can't trust him. I can't trust her. Whatever. Okay, this is where, and he's pushing all those buttons because you got it in you. And now, with the way society is going, with all that confusion, it's only magnified. And it hasn't gotten any better. You know, there was about, excuse me, I don't know if it was maybe way back at the very beginning, maybe 18, 19 years ago, I made a comment about the way things are going as far as the sexual, gender, whatever issues we have in this country. And I had said there's a process. Okay, this is sort of part of the state of the body, I guess. This is not in the body, but the body's dealing with it. Actually, it's probably in the body as well. There's a process where we go from something being completely unacceptable, aberrant, whatever word you want to use, okay? Revolting, completely like, don't even want to talk about it, to something that's being tolerated. That same thing then becomes tolerated. Then it becomes acceptable, and then it becomes preferred. We have witnessed that, since I said that statement, we've witnessed that in the whole dynamic about gender in this country. And I'm not making a political stand here, I'm just making an observation. That what was once completely aberrant and not even acceptable has now become preferred. And that's happening in a lot of different areas. And you're watching that dynamic play around. And we've got to be careful that we don't get swept up into those kind of things. And it's not just about that one issue. It can be a lot of issues where things that were once completely unacceptable got tolerated, then accepted, and then preferred. And we have to be aware of that. And we see this in the marriages. Because you know what? There was a long time ago where, it wasn't really very acceptable to people to live together. That was like, people are living together. Well, before I ever was much of a young kid, that had already become tolerated and even acceptable. And then it almost became preferred because people saw that most marriages ended up in divorce. So now it's preferred just to live with each other because then, after all, then you never have to worry about getting divorced. But you see how that has happened. The same thing with children. We've turned into a place where the way that we raise the children, the way children act with each other, the whole dynamic has changed where, look, I don't want to come across wrong. There is real things called bullying that's out there. But some of the stuff that I see calling bullying, I'm like, when I was a kid, we wouldn't have blinked at that stuff. Because we were really getting bullied. Like bruised, beat up, kicked, spit on, bullied. Okay? We did not have a problem with names. You had a problem with names, it usually led to the kicking, the punching, and the other stuff. If you had a problem with it, then you had to find out what the real bullying was. But yet the society is raising our children to be so unable in their sensitivity to process the awfulness that the world can present at times. So I'm not diminishing that these things exist, but we're raising up a society that can no longer tolerate anything. And so our children are losing the capacity. And it's really like a capacity. In other words, a capacity means you have only so much room that you can put something in or you could store something that can handle something. And they have almost no capacity for negative emotions or negative comments. When we live in a world filled with this stuff. And it's overflowing with it, and yet we have children that cannot, they're raised to not handle that stuff. We don't have an ability to handle losing. The number one path to success, guess what it is? Failing. Those who are the most successful have failed the most. They're not afraid of it. But what do? We give everybody a trophy for participating. Nobody loses anymore. Well, it might hurt their feelings if they lose. Good. Then they'll be motivated to win. That's kind of the point. To get some drive. State of the body right now, the body, like the world, is very unmotivated and undriven and complacently just sitting and wallowing in nothingness. In a desperate, desolate mediocrity where they just barely get by. It's an existence, not a thriving. I'm not picking on you if you're in that spot. You are a product of all of this. But scripturally, that's not where we're to be. We should be putting in that effort, trusting His blessing on the effort to thrive. I didn't say dominate. I didn't expect us all to be the elite and the one percenters, but to not have to stress over, as Yeshua says, why worry about what you're going to eat and what you're going to wear? Well, we do because we don't have enough money to pay the bills. We stress over all of these things, our ability to have health care, our ability to whatever. Because we've not been given a driving, motivating force, because our parents don't have it. And so then it's generational. It's generational cursing. And then we get mad because the few seem to have everything and the most have nothing. Well, because those few are working their you-know-what's off to have everything. And they laugh and say, we like a mediocre, undriven population, so we could have everything. Well, they do nothing. Well, not that they do nothing. They work very hard, but they do work very hard for nothing. That's not where we're supposed to be scripturally. Because we're going after the greatest prize there is. And that takes a huge effort. But we struggle with it because we're not used to putting in effort. We work hard. That's not the same as putting in effort. Look, they worked hard in Egypt, didn't they? That's not the same as putting the effort to work for yourself, to work to provide for your family, to work for generations. We're supposed to be creating generational wealth. It says if you're not providing for your children and your children's children, you're worse than an infidel. But we don't know how to do it. So I'm not picking on you. Don't give me, there he goes. He's talking about money and everything else. Because you want to get into ministry, guess what 99% of your counseling is going to be? People struggling with their finances and their marriage, and the marriages are often because of their finances. So you wonder why I talk about it? Because that's where the problem is, always. And if the finances weren't bad, guess what? Most of the other problems would be handleable. You would handle them so much better. So we struggle in our families, we struggle in our congregations, we struggle in the relationships with members with each other. We have jealousies, we have cliques that form, we have people that are left out, we got people that are preferred, we got people that are talked about behind their back. We got the world does this, why do we do this? I saw this happening in high school and college and everywhere else I ever was in the world. Why aren't we different? So we struggle in our relationships with each other, but you know what else? We also struggle with our relationship with leadership. And I get both of those. We've never really had a good example of either one. When we were in the world, we saw how people treated each other, and we also saw how leadership treated us and how people treated leadership. So this is why congregations struggle. All leadership at times, if not always, is under attack by somebody. It's a very funny place to be. I wish that all of you could understand and take this position and be on the mic and be in the front of the room for just enough time to realize how wonderful it is when people think you're awesome and they love you. And in the next 5 minutes, they think you're the worst thing in the world and you're mean and awful and you're beating up everybody, whatever. But you get both probably within 2 phone calls. You could literally get one and then the other. And so you got some people that think that they want to put you up on this ridiculous pedestal, and other people think that they want to kick you in like you're dirt on the ground. But this is what it's always been in leadership. Why? Because we're dealing with people. It's interesting because And I'm not, hopefully my son can take this properly. You know, my son is going through this point at his age where he's trying to understand global dynamics and how governments work and how things work and what would be maybe an ideal way for people to interact. And I explained that that's why we need Yeshua to come and all those kind of things, because here's the problem. All governments, all structures are always going to be flawed because they're run by people. And we are awful. We are capable of every atrocity and every awful thing there is. And that's hard because, you know, my son has got this hope and this dream and this idealism, which we all probably had when we were that age. And he's only coming to realize that he doesn't want to believe and see that people really are that awful. You know, he's a boy that when he was younger and we were in the car, we'd drive by a homeless person, he would start crying. Like because the guy was homeless. You know, 4 or 5 years old, and it really bothered him. Okay? Because he has a heart for that stuff. But yet, it's a harsh reality that I'm trying to teach him that all of us have to embrace is that we, if left to ourselves, which 99% of the time we are, unless we choose to submit under something, we will destroy everything. We will hurt people because we are selfish, uncaring, greedy people. We just want it all for ourselves, and we really don't care that much about everybody else. Not all of you all the time, but I'm just saying that is the group dynamic that devolves into when under no control of authority. That's why we need a king with a rod of iron to come, because we will never get there unless it's imposed on us. Now, people have tried to do it. Of course, it was done by people, which meant that as soon as they got in charge, they did exactly, here's the new boss, same as the old boss, you know. I mean, that's really what it's been. Because we have to understand that that's why congregations have problems. That's why, by the way, that's why all of us in leadership, that's why we are as flawed and bad as we are. You may be impressed with my ability to teach, and that's great. I appreciate that. But that doesn't mean I'm not a flawed human being like everybody else. And so I love watching people, actually I don't, but you know what I'm saying? It's funny to me that people are shocked when I act like a normal person would act. And I do something dumb or obnoxious or rude or inconsiderate, just like anybody else. Why would you think? Do you not read the Bible? Did Moses make mistakes like that? I mean, almost everybody you read about did something. You're like, really? I mean, we hold David up so high. Well, look what David did. I think there's only like 2 people you really don't see anything like that about. You don't really see Joseph doing anything and Daniel. But everybody else has got issues. That's not to say that they didn't. We just don't get to read about it. But you're all looking for that perfect leader. Good, find him. It's called Yeshua. But when we read Scripture, when Yahweh says, and make a contribution for me, or do this for me, or do this a certain way, he does it through people, because Yahweh is not just standing here where you see him and you bring him things. He worked through Moses. Did they buy into it? No. Not in the beginning. Right? You got Korach rebelling, and then Dathan and Aviram and all. You got all these problems. Even his sister and his brother. Oh, you, Moses, he talks to all of us. That's the same thing you hear today. Well, Yeshua talks to all of us. We got the Ruach speaks to us. We don't need to go through a person. What, do you sound just like Aaron and Miriam? And I'm not claiming to be Moses. I'm just saying in general. You do that with whoever your leaders are. Whoever's watching this, maybe you have a congregation you go to, and it has nothing to do with me. We just generally do that and not recognize that Yahweh uses flawed human beings to do what he needs to do. And that's the state of the body. The body's not able to handle that. We don't seem to know what to do with that. And continuing also, how many of you have noticed that we have people coming into office in this country and other countries that seem woefully unqualified for what they do? They just, because of whatever their background was before, they really weren't raised and studied to be a politician and to understand government and all the world dynamics or local dynamic stuff. They just end up, because of whatever reason they're popular enough to get into office. We've seen this over history. A lot of military guys ended up in, generals or whatever would end up in office. Sometimes it's rich people, like in the case of Trump. He's a guy who happen to have a lot of money. But you have all these kind of dynamics of people that end up in office that don't necessarily have any training for it. Whether it's senators, congressmen, governors, mayors, doesn't matter. And yet we have the same problem here in the body. How many of us have seen, not asking for names, have seen enough teachers and leaders that really didn't know what they were doing? They really weren't qualified or trained for their jobs. The body still has this problem. I mentioned this 5 years ago, I'm mentioning it again. The problem is you have to use your discernment listen, let me finish that sentence first. You have to use your discernment to decide who's who and what's what, and you need to get behind the ones that you really believe are trained and are proper and avoid the other ones. Keep them at a arm's length. Because I can't tell you how many times, and if you're watching right now and it's somebody that we talked to this week, we're not talking about you. Well, we are, but we're not. Because we get these calls every week from people that are under another leadership, wherever it is, and they want us to help them understand how to handle their other leadership. It's like, why are you calling me? If you're not under my leadership, I'm not responsible for you and you're not my problem. Go deal with your other leadership. Well, I don't know how to do it. Then leave there and come under here and we'll work with you here. Why do you want me to help you? Now we're playing like monkey in the middle. I'm going to talk to you. You're going to talk to your leader's going to talk to you. You're going to come back to me. If you ever tell them to talk to me directly and maybe we can talk. I mean, what else are we supposed to do? Because people get emotionally attached and they won't leave where they're supposed to leave. And if they do leave, they make a train wreck out of it. They can't just leave quietly and move on. But this is the state of the body still. It hasn't changed. Look, what did Paul say over and over again? Things like, oh, I wish they would, could handle the milk so I can give them meat. But they're choking on the milk. I said in that teaching, and I've said it multiple times, I think if Paul were alive today, they'd have to put him in a jacket in a rubber room. I think he'd be depressed on lithium or something. Okay, because he look at the body going, really? Really? After 2,000 years? This is like what I left. And I'm not trying to pick on anybody, guilty, okay? But the human condition hasn't grown or changed very much. For all those evolutionists out there, we've not changed a whole lot. We've got a lot more technology, but our character, our personalities, as far as the way we treat people, treat each other, treat leadership, the way we actually care or don't care, that part hasn't changed very much. We're still just as selfish as we've ever been. And so we see that going on. So now let's go have a little bit of fun. And we're going to start talking about, well, just like the president's not going to do this, but I'm going to do this. I'm going to go through most of, if not all of the departments that the government has. See, I don't know if you understand this, but the executive branch of the government has departments, and those all have heads of those departments, like the Department of State or Education or Defense. And so we're going to talk about these departments as part of the way the body looks. And I don't have them in any particular order necessarily, so they're not alphabetical or whatever. I'm just going to kind of randomly go through them as I happen to put them on the paper that I have in front of me, okay? So we were just talking about teachers. So let's first talk about the Department of Education. So what's the state of the Department of Education? Well, out there we've got a lot of unqualified teachers. There are some good ones who probably nobody's ever heard of because they're not on YouTube. Okay, so we have a challenge where some of the best teachers are probably nobody will ever find them, and some of the worst teachers are easy to find in 2 seconds. And you, the new person, has a lot of trouble telling which one's which anyway. Because you think if they're popular and everybody's following them, especially if you're brand new, 5 minutes out of a church, how do you know any different? Because you don't know enough to know what you don't know. See, I don't know if you can actually look back. Most of you are old enough to look back at what it was like to go from high school and earlier into college and to realize, wow, all that I did up to this point was to get me ready to handle what I'm doing now. Because I needed all that background for those first 12 years of education so I could really dig into learning about these subjects from the ability to apply them and use them in doing a career, being a part of society, and understanding the dynamics that are going on in the world around me. But that took 12 years of education just to get to college. Because the last year of high school is what, 12th grade, right? So it took that many years. And yet, you walk out of your Baptist, Methodist, Charismatic, whatever church that you walked out of, Catholic church, doesn't matter, and you're going to expect to understand this in a week, a month, a year. Because I've had people say to me, oh, I've been doing this a long time. Oh, how long? Oh, 8 months. 8 months? Well, because it didn't take them that long to figure out how to stop eating pork and switch to Saturday from Sunday and stop doing Christmas and whatever. It didn't take that long. But they're still thinking like where they came from. They're through that filter of their denominational background. And then what do? Some of these people become teachers because they already were teachers, or they've always wanted to be a teacher, and now they've got their opportunity, and because YouTube allows anybody to be a teacher. All you got to do is make a video, you're a teacher. And if you have a personality that works for people, you might be popular. Next thing you know, you're speaking at conferences. And you've only been doing this 5 years, 3 years, 4 years. And probably a lot of the ones that you see that are like, oh, but this one's been doing it 6, 7 years. Well, but how long have they been teaching it in public? 4. So that means that they were 2 years of not teaching at the most, because some of them probably were teaching, you just didn't know about it on YouTube. 2 years where they were maybe learning stuff, and then boom, they haven't grown a bit probably or a whole lot since they started picking up the mic for the next 4 years. Because to learn, you have to sit under. Because the system is designed for you to need a teacher. You can only go so far without one. You can argue with me all day long, that's fine. I don't mind. You'll learn the difference at some point. The reality is the reality. He designed it. You can't argue against it and win. You can argue against it all you want, but you won't win. He purposely has not allowed every one of us to just have an instant understanding. He didn't just turn on a light switch and switch that switch, and now you understand everything. That's only happened once. When do you see that in Scripture? When Yeshua shows up after his resurrection, and he turns on the light bulb for all of the disciples to show them about himself in the Scriptures. You see this at the end of the Gospels. But even then, he showed them. It still took a being showing them. He didn't just really throw the light switch. He showed them. Now remember, the Ruach was available. For those who didn't think it was always available, it was always available. But hey, Yeshua's already been resurrected. This is already after Acts chapter 2. And he still had to come and he showed them about himself in the Scriptures as a teacher. If you don't need a teacher, why do you even need the Bible? The Ruach's just going to show you. So why do you need to read what Yeshua said or Paul said or anybody said? This is a teacher in a format. It's a textbook. If you were doing homeschooling, right, this would be like, or go to college, well, this is a textbook. This is your textbook. But we don't think we need teachers. So what's the Department of Education state? It's a mess. That's what I said 5 years ago when it was this 2-year anniversary. It's still a mess. Why? Because we're not organized. If you're a Baptist or a Methodist or a Lutheran or any denomination, they're organized enough as a larger group by small churches that pool together their resources to have schools, seminaries, places of education to train up people to think like they think, to understand the verses like they understand them. Where are the places to go to understand a Torah observance from a Messianic point of view that's not being filtered through a Christian denominational mindset? Where do we go? Now, why don't we? Some of you are like, well, when are you going to start a yeshiva? We want to. Guess what? It takes resources. Oh, there you go. He's asking for money. I'm not asking for money. We will build it when we can. If you want to send some money for it, fine. I'm not asking for any. But I'm simply explaining to you what the problem is. We're all small groups not working together. That's why we started MTOI. What's the motto of MTOI? Working together, all these little groups that want to work together to serve the body more effectively, which would include the pooling of our resources so that we could do things like have a yeshiva. A place to train up teachers who understand Scripture from a minimally filtered point of view. Notice I didn't say unfiltered because I don't think that's possible. Okay? But at least hopefully more minimally filtered. But that takes resources. You have to, first of all, you have to have teachers to teach. That's a resource. So here's the catch-22. You need a yeshiva to train up teachers, but you need teachers to have a yeshiva. That's fun. Little dynamic right there. And yeah, you could set up something online, but you know what? It's much more effective, brick and mortar. So you need a place where people could come and they could stay for a year or 6 months or something and get some training. And they could do the rest of it hopefully online or come back and forth. Because it's very hard. Here's the other problem. How many people who come into this as adults can just stop what they're doing, still pay their bills, and go get an education? Nobody, really. Do you know how many full-time people there are in the Messianic that their congregations can be able to support a full-time person? Very few. You know how many congregations own a building? Even less. And so how can you do the things you need to do without those things? Every church, you know, has 5 or 6 pastors. I mean, I've been to some where like, well, no, that pastor you met, he's not the one you need to talk to about the building. He's his other one. And no, they got like 5, 6, 7 pastors, assistant pastors, associate pastors. How many buildings they have. And they're building new ones and breaking ground all the time. I'm not jealous of it. I'm just saying is they can do things because they have resources that are pulled together. And yet we don't. And so we're starting to with MTY. That's part of the reason why we started MTY in 2013 or 14. Okay? I think 13. And so let's understand that when we talk about education, we would love to provide that kind of education. But look what we're already doing. We are already providing 600 plus people with CDs every month who are subscribers to the CDs by mail. These are people that have trouble. Mostly, I know a lot of people do like them also to collect them, whatever, and I appreciate that you want to do that, but you know what? If you don't need to have a collection, if you just access online, please save us the expense. We spent $56,000 last year on CDs. And we're not complaining. I had no idea until last week because we just go and do it without even caring. Okay? As long as there's enough money to do it, we just keep doing it. It's when we have our new accountant who said to me, by the way, would you like to know what you spent last year on CDs? I said, sure. And then when she told me, I was like, oh, that's great, I guess. I don't know. $56,000 shipping CDs out. And we don't charge for any of them. So from our part of the Department of Education, we try to make things available as free as we can. How many videos do we have on YouTube now, Marty? 1,100, so it is 1,100, okay? This is part of our mandate that we felt from the beginning was to provide people the resources they need and to do it for free. And so we've never charged for the teachings, never will. Put them out there on every platform we can find to get them out there. So that's trying to help educate, the body. Let's talk about the Department of Energy. Some of you are thinking, I don't know, what's that have to do with electricity? No, it's not about that. I'm going to turn it around a little bit like I did last time, which is, what's your energy level like? Where are you putting all of your energy into? What are you pouring your energy into things that are fruitful or fruitless? Or do you feel energized or do you feel tired and just worn out? And do you understand what I'm saying? Lackadaisical, complacent? Or do you have energy and you're driven and you're excited and you're motivated? Because some of you remember when you first started learning this stuff, that's what you were. And then you couldn't sustain it very long. But you got to find that. It's kind of like what it talks about in Scripture about leaving your first love. Why would he talk about that? Because you act differently when you're first in love. Then you're married for 15, 20 years, it's not the same. But it should be. Because after all, it's the same person that you felt that's the way about 15, 20 years ago. Yeah, but you already got them, you won them over, they married you, and blah, 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 blah. But yet, there was that moment, those times when that was your first love. That you had that energy, that excitement. You thought about them all the time, and you were excited about when you got to see them. Are you that way about the Torah? Are you that way about the Scripture? Are you that way about the congregation? Are you that way about what the Father's doing in your life? So one of the things I want to ask you with the Department of Energy stuff is, are you exerting yourself? Are you putting energy into things that are wasting your time? That are taking that energy and putting it in the wrong places? You can only answer that question. I can't answer it for you. But how much time do you spend in your electronics? On Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, playing stupid games, whatever it is. Some of you spend a lot of time on YouTube, but it's not watching teachings all the time. It's a lot of other stuff. Okay? Are we aware of the amount of energy we are expending in the wrong places? You know, Yahweh says he wants all your heart, might, and strength. There's a lot of energy in there. So where are you pouring your energy into? Because the body, I think, has a real energy crisis. Okay, because we're not putting it in the right places. What about the Department of Department of Defense. Some of you are right in there in that Department of Defensiveness. All right, let's understand. I know there's a song that we sing that's called "He Is My Defense." Okay, well, he says Yeshua says these things. Yahweh says these things. We see this throughout the Scripture that He's our shield, He's our defense, He's our protector, He's our shelter, He's our covering. Nowhere does it say that He needs you to defend Him. And so let's be careful with that. You stand up for Him, meaning when it's your turn, when someone says they want to push you to break Torah, and you stand up and say, no, I can't do that. That's standing up for Him. You don't need to stand up for Him in my life. You need to stand up for Him in your life. Because some people think, oh, well, I saw my neighbor doing this or my friend doing that. I need to stand up for Yahweh. No, you don't. But I'm concerned about them. Fine, talk to them nicely about the situation. Don't give them grief and attack them or whatever. Or come to the leadership and say, I'm concerned about so-and-so, and I just wanted to bring it to your attention, so maybe you can help them. There may be somebody that actually has a relationship with them where they can then go in and work with them because it's an agreed upon relationship. You want to be effective in someone's life, you must have the appropriate relationship to do that. And so some of the people you want to create change in, you don't have the right relationship with them to do that. So let's be careful with that Department of Defense. And then the other side is that defensiveness. Oh, are we defensive? It doesn't take much for us to get all defensive about everything. But you know what? You don't like it when you see your Christian friends do that when you start telling them about some Torah stuff and they get all defensive. Oh, you're judging me. Oh, this and that and whatever. We get really quick to go on the defense. So let's be careful with that. That ties in with the Department of Justice. Because some of you get all defensive and you get all involved because you want justice. Well, it's not right what they're doing, and it's not right what he said, and it's not right. It's not your job to judge. It's your job to use discernment. Okay? What does discernment ask us to do? To look and evaluate whether or not we should be involved or interacting with what we see happening. That's not judging the situation as far as, well, they're evil, wrong, and sinning. It's simply saying, I don't know why they're doing what they're doing, but I probably don't need to be doing it. That's discernment. Judging would be then going to your friend saying, did you know that so-and-so was doing such and such? And can you believe that? Now you're judging, Lashon Hara, everything. Better you should have seen it and decided, I probably don't need to be there. Or you're already happening around you and you decide to extricate yourself out and walk away. But we want justice. Well, that's just wrong. That's not right. I got to stand up. It's unfair. Got to remember that once you did that, you jumped in the judge's seat and you decided what's right and what's wrong. So that's why he says, there's a verse that says something. What's that? Oh, justice, vengeance, all those things, who do they belong to? Who's the right and just God? Our Elohim, Yahweh, our Elohim, right? So, but we want justice. Okay, he'll bring justice, but not on your terms and in your timing and his way. A lot of times people don't understand when they read Scripture and Israel goes through those lands to get to the land and they're clearing out some of the peoples there. And they're like, why would they do those mean things to those people? Well, actually, they were rendering justice, judgment from the Elohim of the universe on those peoples for things that we may not even have any idea what they did. But he was using them to render his judgment. And it could have been things they had done years earlier. But this is how he decided his timing to do it. So, but we want justice. How about the Department of the Treasury? Well, we already talked a lot about that. We already know we're all broke and need to work harder in figuring out how to not be broke and how we can deal with our funds that he gives us the stewardship for. So I'm not going to go into that anymore. But it does tie into the Department of Labor. You know, we have a lot of people underemployed or unemployed that we deal with on a regular enough basis. We at MTY actually help people find jobs the best we can. We do find opportunities. It's amazing how many people, though, at times when we offer them things, turn them down because, well, you know, I don't really want to do that. But you're not doing anything. Why do you have such a little attitude, your nose up in the air about whatever it is? You're not paying your bills now. Go get that job. If you don't like it, while you have that job, look for another one. At least you can pay the bills in the meantime. But, you know, we're not taught the drive to work. You know, I don't mean the drive like in your car, but that drive, that effort. You go back generations, and there was a lot more of, there was a caring about the quality of the work, of doing the job right, of having your name on what you do, your reputation. Now we've got generations who just want to get to work, get out of work, and get home, and that's it. They don't care as long as they get, is it 5 o'clock yet? Is my shift over? Instead of being there to be the best possible employee. That's why there are so many verses about things like the hirelings and how they work and what they do and their attitudes. Because after all, we are servants of the Most High. And we have to be diligently about our business. But we don't like that word labor. Ugh, labor. You know, that's why they call what a woman goes through labor. It's painful. It's no fun. It's an effort. It's a struggle. But you know what? It builds character in you. It develops a strength in you. And you know what? As awful as it is when you're going through that labor, not just the women, but people in general, oh, you're working so hard, but after you're done and you feel good and satisfied about what you've accomplished because you can see the end result, like a woman with her baby who probably said to her husband, remind me, I never want to do this again. And then after they have the baby, like, can we have another one? They forget because it was worth it. But I think we don't think of these things as being worth it. It's a struggle. Yeshua said, I work, my Father works, you need to work. And we do. And I'm not trying to pick on everybody. A lot of you guys out there are working as hard as you can, I get it. But you know what? You may need to have somebody to counsel with you to help you open up the possibilities of doing other things. Things that you would never even realize you could probably do and make a better, not only living for yourself in terms of money, but maybe enjoy what you're doing more. Because there's a lot of people out there who hate what they're doing. Okay? How about the Department of Health and Human Services? Oh yeah, we got a lot of sickness and illness and all kinds of things going on. Look, I struggle with that cough, remember that? I haven't coughed a lot in a while there, so I'm finally getting better, but it was a struggle. And we do have a lot of people that we talk to that are struggling with health issues, whether it's things as horrible as cancer or things that are in the body that are like joints and knees and hips and backs and other things that are out. And so they can't do certain things because they're in pain all the time. We've had people breaking things and bones and feet and ankles and stuff and arms. All kinds of things happening on with the health. But it helps to have a body there to nurture you, care for you, provide for you, make sure you're okay. And so we even have those things going on in the body. How about the Department of Housing and Urban Development? You know, even here at MTY, we actually spend quite a bit of time trying to help people find housing. We got people that, you know, they are moving to the area. They need housing. We got people that get married, and maybe that creates a housing problem. We got people that move, maybe a roommate leaves, that creates a housing problem. Maybe something happens with your economics and you need to upgrade or downgrade. So, yeah, we have all kinds of things with housing and issues that have to relate it to housing. And so that's one thing. Look, we've had a family almost every month move here for the last couple of months. And more are coming. And we're excited about that. And no, you're not all numbers to me. Like, hey, I'm just excited because you were the January family. Okay? We're always excited when you guys come. Now, bear in mind, my personality is not one of warm fuzzies and coming to spend, dinners and lunches with you and everything else. Okay? I mean, how many people do you think had Moses over for lunch or for dinner? I'm just saying that it just wasn't, some people's personality is just not that way. I'm not trying to compare myself to him in terms of his leadership. I'm saying personality-wise, I think we're similar in some ways. Okay, we have our issues, we have our we're not the warm, fuzzy type, and we're getting our anger issues and other things like that. And so I'm just saying that you just got to understand that I'm growing and developing those areas, and I struggle with those things. So you have to create leeway with the people that you are dealing with in the congregation that may have issues like that too. Some people are very shy. Some people are over the top exuberant, and that may irritate you almost as much as the person who's shy. I'm just saying, because there are things that if they're different from you, it's uncomfortable. Right? And so we got to adjust to those things. And when we have people moving and they're coming and joining the area, guess what they bring? A whole new dynamic in. And sometimes it works well, sometimes it doesn't. If the group is big enough, they will find that little part of the group that they sort of are most naturally a fit with. And that's great. Smaller groups, it's more tough to find those people that actually you match well with. Right? All right. Well, this is an interesting one. What am I going to say about this? The Department of the Interior. Okay, go listen to the heart of the matter. That'll deal with the interior. I know that's not what that department's about. I know it's about things like parks and everything else. But, okay, so we're going to deal with the interior. Okay, work on the heart of the matter teaching. All right, Department of Transportation. Oh, my goodness. We've had everybody's car break down or blow up or whatever in the last month. Unbelievable how many cars. We must have, in this group, this congregation is like not even 100 people, and we probably have lost like 10 cars in the last month. It is just an incredible thing. All right, Department of State. I guess one of the ways we could talk about that is, the inability of congregations to work together, to interact with each other. Well, because, they don't believe this thing that we believe, or, they believe that other thing that, and so we can't talk to them. It's like us saying, well, we can't talk to whatever country because of whatever, That's the thing that blows my mind the most, that people get mad at whoever's in charge, whether it was going back to other presidents years ago to even today. They get mad that president will actually talk to a country we have a problem with. How are you ever going to fix it without talking to them? It seems absurd. Well, we don't like what they're doing, so we can't talk to them. How are you ever going to influence that situation if you never talk to them? It's dumb. Well, same thing even within the body. We don't talk to each other. There's like 3 or 4 other groups that came out of this group in this area that we never talked to us. Some of them talk to each other a little bit, but they never talk to us. We all believe in the same Messiah. We believe in the same witness, word, scripture, Torah. But we have personality problems. See, it goes back to what I said at the beginning. People wrecking the whole deal. The pastor that performed my wedding said to me, and I said this story before, but when I first came into ministry, I asked him for advice, and he said, best, most fulfilling job you could ever have. As a matter of fact, to be absolutely perfect, if we could just figure out how to get the people out of it. And then with his thick British accent, he said, don't let the buggers get you down. We're bringing people into the mix. It's already screwed up. Let's see. The Department of Agriculture. We could actually talk about that. We are in the process of, we just approved a garden somewhere on the property, but that's not what I'm talking about. We're in the process of getting a few hundred acres, not too far from here, that has already been used to grow lots of crops and has been very good for agriculture. It's actually zoned for agriculture. And if we get this property, we will grow stuff. And we'll actually be able to sell it and have a revenue stream that could help support things like a yeshiva. Okay? So we'll have that going on. And, We might even do a little thing like, there's a group that does this agricultural Torah teaching stuff out in the West Coast. Well, maybe we could do something similar over here, where we bring in teenagers and young adults and have them work and learn Torah through the agricultural model, which is a scriptural model. I mean, most of Scripture is taught through the agricultural metaphor, okay? And so that's something we could do here once we have the property. So keep that in prayer. I mean, and by the way, we do have enough money to buy this property, not to do anything with it once we buy it, but we could buy this property. But keep that in prayer, if that's something Father wants us to do. We're in negotiations about that right now. How about the Department of Commerce? I find that an interesting one for us in the body, because I think that's where the body goes off in the wrong direction, as they try to treat this like a business. Commerce, we need to sell stuff and make money. Now, I did say if we had crops, well, that's different. You get to work and have a product. But I'm talking about selling teaching, selling anointed hankies and anointed this and whatever they're doing in ministries out there, and selling their books and their DVDs and their all that other stuff. I think it's great that we're getting materials out to people. I just don't like that we're turning it into commerce, okay? Oh, but you guys sell stuff on your website, only stuff that you could want that you don't need. Okay? Yeah, we have these coins, right? For Pidyon Ben or for whatever, and we sell them. Okay, great. We have scriptures, we have Bibles on our website. You know what? I don't think there's too many people out there that don't have a Bible. Oh, but they'd like this one. Okay, well, if you'd like this one, you don't need this one. We'll sell it to you. It costs us money. We don't really make hardly anything on them. As a matter of fact, there are people that contact us occasionally who don't have one, and we mail them it. But we have people that are on government disability and that kind of thing that don't have a Bible, and we'll mail them one. And so commerce, we have shofars on our website, but again, that's a luxury item. You don't need to get one from me, and certainly don't have to get a big fancy one. You get a little one for like $50 without any problem. And so it's the commerce of the teachings and of the materials that you need that bothers me more, okay? There really should be a way to get those things to people and allow them we read that today in Exodus 25, that their hearts could be moved to support that effort. And let them support it we have people out of $56,000 worth of CDs that we shipped out, some of those people write checks and send them in. Not all of them, not even most of them. But you know what? We don't care, and it's fine, but there are those whose hearts are moved. And by the way, a lot of them who get them, they can't afford to send them. Their hearts are moved, but they're just on government disability and they have no money or whatever it is, and they can't. And it breaks their hearts that they can't. But we're very blessed that we're able to have the funds, because the rest of you that tithe and offer that help us support what we're doing are able to provide these things for people for free. We have somebody that does all these fancy videos you get to see. He needs to pay his bills. We pay him a salary. We got fancy cameras that we have to shoot the filming and all that kind of stuff. And that costs money. And you guys help support that. The Father inspires you and it moves your heart to help get this work done so we can provide things for people for free. We don't have subscriber fees or website memberships. So there's no commerce going on that way. I'm available, Robert's available. Why? Because we're also able to have the ability to feed our families and pay for shelter and stuff because of the salaries we're able to get because of the funds that come in, so that we can be available to you 24/7. And we can tell you for a fact that there are times that we get calls anytime within the 24. And absolutely every day of the 7. But some of you think, well, there's not supposed to be full-time ministry. Until you need one, you'll say that. You might think a little differently the day you need one. Because some of you have got teachers and leaders, or you've had them in the past, who taught on Shabbat but had full-time jobs, and you couldn't reach them on a Wednesday when you had an emergency at 3 in the afternoon. What are you going to do? Because the emergencies aren't going to come up at a convenient time to you. But we're able to do these things because why? Because of the Father inspiring things to happen, and that funds what we're doing, but we're not doing it as commerce. Okay? We're not doing it as commerce. We have a yeshiva. I promise you the yeshiva will not be a money-making enterprise. The only thing that it might cost is to offset the cost of housing the person and the materials. We will not charge you for the education. Because that's, again, something that's needed. You know, we have a very wise person that I met once, many years ago. He was just turned 65 years old, and one of the things he taught me was that he didn't like when people charged for things because they were already determining what the thing was worth, and maybe he wanted to give them more. But now that they put a price tag on it, they were only going to get what they said. So if I gave him a teaching on a CD, he may decide that teaching was worth $50. He may decide it wasn't worth anything. But if I had put a price of $5 on that CD, that's all, you know. In other words, you understand what I'm saying? But what he always said to me was, if I need it, you should give it to me. If I want it, you should charge for it. It's okay. If it's something I just want, I don't really need it, sure, you could sell it to me. But if I need it, why would you keep something away from somebody who needs it? Need is a big thing. We give away the teachings because I really think you need them. Not you particularly, but there are people in the greater, whoever's listening, that need them. So we make them free. No commerce. All right. Department of Homeland Security. All right, everybody's got their concealed carry permits, and we're all good. We're all packing and carrying, and we're good. I'm teasing. Look, we know who our protector is. We know who's got us covered. No weapon formed against us shall prosper. We have to just keep in line with him. That's our main thing, is let's not get caught up with that we need to have so much stuff packed up in cans in our basement or so much gold and silver hoarded up or whatever it is. Sure, I think it's a good idea to have a certain amount of days of something put aside because there can be short-term, interim emergencies that you could be without food for a week or two. My wife and I have been in places where the power went out and you couldn't get anything for a week or two. Fortunately, we were able to go someplace else until that finished, but if we couldn't, we would have been really in a hard place without power and no food. Whatever we had in the house, a lot of it was in the refrigerator spoiled when the power went out. And a lot of the rest of the food that wasn't spoiled would only last so long. But, you know, think about how much of your food you go to the refrigerator for versus the cabinet. So once that power goes out, you're going to lose all that stuff within a day. If you actually start opening the refrigerator, you lose it faster. And so, yeah, it'd be a good idea to have some stuff on hand, but let's not get distracted. Whatever's going to happen, this is the one thing I can promise you, I feel stronger than anything else that the Father has told me, whatever that means. Okay, I didn't hear a voice. Is teach them to do what they're supposed to do, and they'll be where they're supposed to be. I've said that for 20 years. You can ask my wife. I've always said that. So when people ask me, what about end times, and what about, eschatology, and what about Daniel and Matthew 24 and blah, 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 I say, why are you focused on that if you haven't figured out how to do what you're supposed to do? The only thing that's going to keep you safe in whatever that is, whether you figure it out or not, is doing what you're supposed to do. So focus on, you want Homeland Security? Focus on Torah observance, in covenant, in the right heart, with the fruit of the Spirit. That is the only place you're going to find your security. Just keep that in mind. And then we have promises that we will be safe. And even if we're martyred, we have promises that that's going to still be okay. After all of our heroes, not all, but a good many of them were martyred. You see all the apostles. You see Yeshua himself. But yet, for all of them, we know it's going to be okay. You have to know that. Okay, the last one. Wow, we've gone over an hour. Last one, the Department of Veterans Affairs. You know what the body's not doing? And even within some of the churches, but the body's not doing, is taking care of those that are getting older. And we want to make sure that we are taking care of those, like the Rabbi Toms and Rebbes and Joannes, and the others in the body as they get older, especially if they've been in leadership or in ministry, because you know what? They're not provided with a pension. They're not provided with a retirement plan. They only receive whatever the federal government gives them as far as Social Security, whatever other things. But if they've been doing ministry their whole life, unless they were able to work it all out for themselves, what is the body doing to take care of those people, the veterans of the body? That's an important thing I think that we need to be doing, Okay. So hopefully that helps us to get a better sense of the state of the body. Now look, I'm very optimistic. The body is growing slowly, but it's getting there. And we're starting to get more and more serious about things. And there's some, culling out that happens, as far as every now and then Abba shakes the tree, so all the fruit and nuts just sort of fall out, and we kind of clean house a little bit, okay? That's why we're told to cling and cleave and hold on tight. But just understand that as long as human beings are still running all these departments, they're not going to be flowing perfectly. And that's the way it's going to be till Yeshua gets here. And so we have to do the best we can within the very flawed system. I'm not even talking about our outside government system, I mean within the body. We have to understand that no matter how good we do this, we're still doing it as human beings. And that means that it's going to be a little struggle, a little rough. But if we are patient and filled with the Ruach and having love, joy, peace, patience, all that other stuff, just maybe we'll get there in a right attitude and be successful in helping others to see why we're going and they'll want to join and go forward with us. Okay, and I'm not just talking about MTY, I mean as far as Torah observant Israelites who are trying to walk this out in the context of Messiah. That people will see this as something that has, why are they happy when everybody else is upset? Why are they not stressed when everybody else is stressed? Why do they seem to be at peace when we're all going crazy? We should have something that they want. And they could be drawn to that and say, what in the world's going on? Why are you, whatever. Because there's going to be crises and chaos and confusion, and we could be that calm in the storm, and they'll look at us like, why don't you seem to be worried? Because this is just stuff. I'm not worried about this stuff. I've already got a bigger plan and a bigger picture I'm working on. I'm not worried about all this stuff. See, but we get too emotionally attached to the stuff and not emotionally attached enough to Him. That's where our problem is in the body. All right, Father, we come before you, and we do recognize that while this was a somewhat humorous but somewhat serious endeavor here, that ultimately we are looking towards your government, not any government of the world or of MTY or any other thing, but we're looking forward to the only way that this can work, which is for you to send your Son in power and glory and honor with his rod of iron to rule and reign and to set all things straight. So, Father, we thank you for showing us this information, and showing us and revealing to us what's coming in the future, and giving us the path that leads to that future successfully. Father, help us to truly embrace what we can do and what we should do and what we shouldn't do and what we can't do, so that we can walk in your ways and be pleasing in your sight. So, Father, we want to thank you, give you praise, glory, and honor in the name above all names, Yeshua our Messiah. Amen. Amen. Amen.